except that you can't say like. That's not what you're supposed to do on that. When I got ready to come down here tonight, I was getting dressed, and I said to my wife, in your wildest dreams, did you ever imagine that I would become a stand-up comic? And she thought about it a minute, and then she said, you're not in my wildest dreams. The truth hurts. I really shouldn't try to make fun of her, because today I've been married now for 43 years. Today's not our anniversary. But I've been married 43 years. And actually, it's not all to one woman. It's like 29 to one woman and then like 14 to the other one. But nevertheless, I have been married 43 years. So that's something to consider. One thing that I found kind of interesting is that as I get older, I get more vengeful. And I think that there's things that I need to set right. So when I think about people who have abused me over the years, I look for ways to get even. So this morning, as I was driving down the street, I noticed that there was a plumber pulling in to the Comcast office. I drove up there, waited for him to get out of his truck, and I held out a $50 bill. I said, are you here to service Comcast on some plumbing matter? He said, yes. I said, I will give you this $50 bill if you will call them and tell them that you will be there sometime between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. He said he would do it, except that he's afraid he'd lose his job, but I felt good just even asking him. Have you ever wanted to do stuff like that? That really makes you feel warm inside. Sort of like wetting your pants. It's good. Well, one of the things that I've noticed that kind of disturbs me a little bit is that when my wife wants to go to church on Sunday, she wants me to go with her. Go figure. So she'll get all dressed up, she'll want me to get dressed, and then we'll go into church, and if she's late getting ready to go, and she's been late for everything pretty well, 30 minutes late for our wedding, right, Abigail? Mm-hmm. Right. 30 minutes late for our wedding. So we get to church, and on the front row, the only seats are left. So I sit down in the front row, and the minister is talking, and he's trying to say something insightful, and he'll say something, and when he does, then he looks for someone in the congregation to give him some affirmation about it. So he'll say something like, would you rather soar with the eagles or slither with the snakes? It's pretty cryptic. Then he'll look down at somebody on the front row, and he'll look at me and he'll say, Brother Harvey, would you rather soar with the eagles or slither with the snakes? Well, I've got a 50-50 chance. And I try to logic this thing out. So I say, well, snakes don't get caught in jet engines. But then I found out that wasn't the answer he was looking for, and so I get kicked by my wife. A few minutes later, he comes back with another one, and he says, I cried because I had no shoes until I saw a man who had no feet. And then he looked down again, he thought he'd give me another chance, and he said, Brother Slintz, if you had no shoes, what would you say to a man who had no feet? And I thought about it, and I said, I would ask him if he had any shoes he wasn't using. Yeah, I thought it was good too, but apparently it wasn't. Whack! Got it again. So you learn. Even after 43 years, you're still learning. One of the fun things that I get to do now with grandkids is to discover the world through their eyes. Do any of y'all have grandchildren? Grandchildren are pretty cool, because one day I remember my granddaughter was looking through the closets, and she came across my wife's fur coat. My wife has a rabbit jacket, and down here in Florida, of course, it doesn't get much use. So she was looking at it, she said, what is that? And I said, that is a rabbit jacket. She said, it's rabbit fur? And I said, yes. And she said, It must have been huge. You don't know what to do with stuff like that. One thing that has kind of got my goat a little bit is that when I go over and I try to read fairy tales to my grandchildren, the grandchildren, when I read it to them, I realize how out of date fairy tales are. I'd like to give you just a couple of examples, okay? One example. There's a young lady who, I forget exactly how it happened, either she pricked her finger or she ate an apple or something like that. And she encountered some poison and she went into a coma. You know the story I'm talking about? She went into a coma. Now her family, instead of taking her to a trauma center or anything like that, they put her in a glass coffin. They took her into a forest and they left her there with the little woodland creatures. Not what I would have done, but I guess that family thought it was the right thing. So, she's laying out there in this glass coffin in the forest, sound asleep. And she was a beauty. And as she slept there, sooner or later along comes a person on a white horse. I think he had some royalty rank, possibly a prince. And he comes walking up and sees her. And when he sees her, he just is seized by how beautiful she is, this sleeping beauty. And he looks at her and falls instantly in love with her. Obviously a very shallow relationship. But he pulls back the top of this glass coffin, leans over, and in a fit of what is without a doubt sexual battery, no question about it, he leans over and plants a big wet one on her. He kisses her. She immediately awakens mysteriously, and it makes you wonder, why didn't somebody try that before they put her in the coffin? No. But she wakens, she looks at him, she falls instantly in love with him, this charming prince, and they go riding off together happily ever after. Okay? Now, what in the world does this tell a child as a story for the future or even any degree of realism? Nothing. Okay? Now, one other story that I want to show you that's no good, and then I'm going to ask you if you would like to hear a more realistic story from today. Okay? This other one's pretty short. It's about this guy that sits on a wall. His name's Humpty Dumpty. He falls. Okay? He gets injured badly. Now, they send out some